After the successful Israeli strike on the Islamic regime targets in Iran, Israel is now making preparations in the event that the regime attempts to retaliate against Israel, a move that, according to news security sources, seems increasingly likely. Let's take a look.
It was an embarrassing night for the Islamic regime in Iran. Over 100 Israeli aircrafts penetrated Iranian airspace, conducting a series of targeted strikes on IRGC bases, weapons factories, and military sites, and all returning home without a scratch. Iranian S-300 missile defense batteries were destroyed, missile and drone production sites massively hampered, and additional radar systems wiped out by precision IDF airstrikes, leaving Iran virtually defenseless. Satellite imagery also shows Israel hit Parchin Base, a former nuclear site with extensive missile production. Yet despite stern warnings from the U.S. and Europe not to respond to Israel's strike, the regime is reportedly preparing to do just that. Security sources in Israel assess the regime is preparing a large counterstrike on Israel. This comes as Ayatollah Khamenei took to X to threaten Israel, warning of Israel's miscalculation, even opening a Hebrew language account to issue the warning before almost immediately being suspended for his comments. The regime's foreign minister also spoke out against the attack and accused the United States of involvement in the strike, which Iran was warned about several hours before it took place. The regime has been unified in their determination to respond to Israel, noting their right to self-defense. As Europe and the U.S. urge de-escalation and warn of the dangers of regional war, Israel has stated they are prepared to escalate should the regime make the mistake of attacking Israel once again.
The war in Lebanon continues to intensify as the IDF advances in South Lebanon. It's also suffering painful losses. The army announced the names of 5 reservists killed in the fighting. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The IDF offensive in South Lebanon continues to advance amid ongoing aerial assaults degrading Hezbollah missile and missile launching capabilities. The Parachute Brigade are fighting a targeted ground operation in South Lebanon under the command of the 91st Division. The forces destroyed terror infrastructure above and below ground, located and confiscated many weapons, raided a Radwan 4 staging area, and confiscated maps and documents of the enemy. The Air Force hit command centers and arms storage in Beirut, reducing a number of buildings to rubble. Precision strikes are systematically destroying military bases and buildings of the Radwan force. Heavy damages are reported in the Lebanese port city of Sidon in South Lebanon. Buildings storing missiles and missile launchers were destroyed in the Bekaa Valley. As fighting intensifies, growing numbers of refugees are crossing into Syria from Lebanon. Walking with their children and carrying belongings in their hands, refugees streamed across the Masna border from Lebanon into Syria. Lebanese civilians paying the price for Hezbollah dragging them into a war with Israel. The Israeli Defense Forces announced that 5 Israeli reserve soldiers were killed and 14 wounded in a battle with Hezbollah operatives in a South Lebanon village, bringing the IDF's toll in the ground offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon and during operations to 34. The slain troops were named as Captain Rabbi Avraham Yosef Goldberg, 43, from Jerusalem, Master Sergeant Gilad El-Maliach, 30, from Jerusalem, Captain Amit Chayut, 29, from Haifa, Major Eliav Amram Abitbul, 36, from Eitan, and Sergeant Major Shaul Moyal, 47, from Karnei Shamron. May they all be of blessed memory.
Following the alerts that were activated this morning in the Western Galilee area, the Air Force successfully intercepted a drone that crossed over from Lebanese territory. Incoming rockets were detected in the Upper Galilee, and Hezbollah attacks are ongoing. Some 120 rockets were launched by Hezbollah in the past 24 hours. One of the rocket attacks left 3 wounded in the Arab-Israeli town of Tamra. Earlier, a drone attack wounded 2 in an industrial zone in the Galilee. And now let's hear from an Israeli resident who was on the ground.
ללא התראה, כטב"ם פגע בקצה של המבנה שלנו, קרוב מאוד למשרדים. יש לי 2 פצועים קל, 9 פצועי חרדה, אוזניים וכל מיני דברים כאלה. נזק מסוים למפעל, ל2 מבנים.
Even as Israel continues to face relentless attacks, the IDF is pursuing diplomacy as hostage talks are set to return and initial ceasefire options are being explored. Here to discuss those possibilities is Colonel Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism. Colonel Eisen, always a pleasure to have you with us. Given the IDF's recent success militarily in multiple places, what kind of position is Israel in now to negotiate compared to before? Is there a chance that we can actually reach a deal that will bring at least some of these hostages home?
One of the questions that we ask every single day is, what does the terror entity, Hamas in this case, want? They took brutally hundreds of people from their home. They've been holding brutally these 101 for such a long time. What do they want in return? And at the end, what's happened right now is that you're seeing a change in the Hamas demands. The death of Sinwar opened an opportunity, and I only say an opportunity because the question is, will Hamas take it? Hamas want to, I'm going to say the worst kind of thing, have their cake and eat it too. How can I say that about something called the hostages? They want to end the war. They want Israel to be out of the Gaza Strip. They want all of the prisoners that were taken in this war to be released, all of them, for, they won't even say who the 101 are. So yes, there's absolutely more momentum now because all of the different stakeholders who could possibly pressure Hamas, both Egypt and Qatar, Hamas in Qatar, all of them seem to be on board to advance a step. And I want to be hopeful, but I'm always the one that comes back and says, I don't know what Hamas in the Gaza Strip, as opposed to all of the other stakeholders, will decide to do.
Now, how dangerous is it for Israel to implement any kind of ceasefire now in Lebanon? I know there have been some rumors about some talks to some degree. Would we be able to reach a compromise that would allow these Israeli communities in the north to return home anytime in the near future?
That one, I'm actually, I don't want to say optimistic, but I do see the step forward in that sense, meaning that the immediate threat, which was absolutely there, of Hezbollah doing an October 7th type attack, but way worse, against the communities, all of the northern Galilee. That is what the Israeli ground troops are working against right now, exposing really incomprehensible amounts of weapons, of tunnels, of stockholds, all of these to be able to enact that attack, and that we are destroying. Will we be able ever, and I say this with such a heavy heart, to stop all rocket fire? What are we going to do about the UAVs? At the end of the day, diplomacy is not a bad word. Diplomacy is not about making peace. It's also about using your allies and other communities to be able to better your own position. And I don't want us to conquer all of Lebanon. And even if we would, just like we haven't conquered all of the Gaza Strip, that wouldn't necessarily stop it. So yes, there is a chance right now.
Now, how does the Islamic regime in Iran play into all of this? I mean, how can there be a ceasefire in Lebanon or in Gaza when the head of the snake, so to speak, isn't actually being dealt with? Are we just kicking the can down the road of confrontation with this regime, especially on the nuclear issue? Or can they actually be deterred?
And I'm listening to you right now and I'm thinking, isn't that what we just did? We directly went against the Islamic regime of Iran. To me, the most important part is that we shouldn't be doing that alone. Iran and the Islamic regime of Iran, this isn't about the 90 million Persian people. This is about Khamenei that you're seeing right now. This is about both the Revolutionary Guard. It's about the ideology that he touts every single day. Just this Friday, here we are today, again saying that Israel is the cancer of the world, that Zionism needs to be destroyed. And I put that out there, absolutely something that needs to be taken care of so that they can't fire those ballistic missiles, so that they can't get to that stage of having nuclear weapons. But this shouldn't be about Israel against the Islamic regime of Iran. The entire free world should be united and active in stopping this threat. So most definitely it goes back to the Islamic regime of Iran. I strongly believe that you have to look at it with all of them together, and that means that you have to give and take, and that's not a happy situation, but we should not be facing the Islamic regime on our own.
Absolutely. Well, Colonel Eisen, we are out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Efforts are intensifying to secure the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. Egyptian and Qatari mediators are pushing for a breakthrough as top officials from Israel, Egypt, and the U.S. meet in Doha. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani has more details.
In a renewed push for a hostage deal, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi proposed a 2-day ceasefire in Gaza, offering to swap 4 Israeli hostages held by Hamas for Palestinian prisoners. Speaking at a press conference in Cairo, Sisi expressed hope that this mini-deal could open the door to larger negotiations aimed at ending the crisis. Meanwhile, in Doha, Mossad chief David Barnea is meeting with CIA Director William Burns and Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Al Thani. Together, they're exploring possibilities for both a short-term exchange and possibly a wider release deal with Hamas. Although Hamas leaders have reportedly rejected past offers, including one guaranteeing safe passage out of Gaza, the recent death of Hamas leader Sinwar has brought a renewed sense of urgency. Israel has so far been non-committal on Egypt's proposal, focusing on its demand for Hamas's removal from Gaza as a long-term solution. In Israel, anticipation is high as these talks unfold in Doha. Egypt and Qatar continue their efforts, hoping a phased deal can bridge gaps between Israeli demands and Hamas's conditions for a full ceasefire. These discussions mark the highest-level talks since the crisis began, with both Egypt and Qatar playing crucial roles. For now, it's a waiting game to see if any of these proposals will bridge the gap between Israeli demands and Hamas's stance.
As part of our ILTV and Israel Bonds special October 7th memorial event, ILTV's Sivan Raviv sat down with Moshe and Amir Achimas, the father and brother of the late Tomer Achimas, a soldier who bravely fought to save lives on that fateful day. In our efforts to share these powerful stories, let's take a look at an excerpt from their conversation.
We have 2 very special guests with us today. Staff Sergeant Tomer Yaakov Achimas was a signal soldier for the Gaza Division's Southern Brigade Chief from Lehavim. Staff Sergeant Achimas, a 20-year-old hero, was killed fighting Hamas on October 7th at Kibbutz Nirim. His body was taken captive and later recovered from Gaza by the IDF. Tomer fought alongside Sergeant Kirill Brodsky and their brigade chief, Colonel Asaf Hamami, the commander of the Southern Brigade in the Gaza Strip. Residents of Kibbutz Nirim said that were it not for the bravery of Achimas, Hamami and Brodsky, the kibbutz would have absorbed an even greater tragedy than it did that Saturday. His father, Moshe Achimas, and his brother, Amir Achimas, are here with us today to tell his story. Moshe, on October 7th, Tomer demonstrated incredible bravery during the battle near Kibbutz Nirim. He was described as a hero by many. What does being a hero mean to you, and how do you hope that people will remember his legacy?
Maybe let's take a few steps back, describe what happened, really happened there. So, the intimate squad of Colonel Asaf Hamami that comprise Tomer and Kirill and Asaf itself jump on the jeep early morning of this cursed Sabbath, 6:30, heading to Kibbutz Nirim. Why Kibbutz Nirim? Because the first alarm that they got from the fence, the electronic fence, was that there is a suspicion for penetration in this area. So they were heading to Nirim. It takes about 15 minutes. So they left their base at 6:30, early morning, heading to Nirim. When they reached Nirim, they got into a crossfire. Makes sense to get fire from Gaza Strip, yeah? But to get into a fire coming from Kibbutz Nirim doesn't make sense. But Asaf immediately realized that terrorists already penetrate the kibbutz. So he took a decision to get into the kibbutz and to confront these terrorists. They drove into the kibbutz, and there were only three fighters, and they actually got into a face-to-face battle, based on the information we got from the IDF, between 60 to 80 terrorists.
Wow.
Yeah. The battle lasted about 15 minutes, face-to-face. Asaf, Colonel Asaf, was injured first. And Tomer and Kirill, both of them, continued to fight face to face, and in between trying to provide medical treatment to their colonel, and also calling in the radio for help, for someone, but nobody came. They were alone. At 7:05, Tomer's voice was silent. The three bodies were kidnapped to the Gaza Strip. Going back to your question, what does it mean to be a hero? And the three heroes actually demonstrate a very noble values that we as a society must follow and adapt. Friendship, brotherhood, consistency, and willing to sacrifice your life in order to save innocence. This is bravery. I'm proud of him. He did his utmost in order to save life, and he did. He did.
He saved many lives.
He saved many lives.
This interview was part of a program that helped kick off Israel Bond's Invest in Life campaign. By investing $107 or more in Israel Bonds, you send a powerful message. We're united and we're committed to securing a strong Israel. Please scan the QR code and invest in life. You can see the full interview on our YouTube page. The fatality in yesterday's mass casualty terrorist truck ramming attack has been identified as 73-year-old Betzalel Karmi from Rishon LeZion. The attacker, who was neutralized, was identified as Rami Nasrallah, an Arab-Israeli driver from Kalanswa in central Israel. Hamas put out a statement praising the attack, but did not claim credit. His employer said that he has a regular route and unloaded his truck in Ramat HaSharon before deviating from his route and driving towards Glilot to carry out the attack. 32 people were wounded in the attack when the driver rammed his truck into the back of a bus filled with civilian pensioners on a day trip to October 7th related memorial events. 5 remain in serious condition. The attack was at the Glilot junction close to Mossad headquarters, recently targeted by Hezbollah drones. Police are still probing the attack and are expected to officially declare it a terror incident. And joining us now from the Knesset is ILTV's executive editor Mayan Hoffman, where lawmakers have reconvened to debate several high-stakes and controversial bills. Mayan, what can you tell us about the discussions underway?
Thank you, Emily. I am standing here outside the gates of the Knesset, where the legislators are returning after a contentious 3-month vacation in order to launch the winter session. There are a number of items on the table related to the ongoing war. In addition to that, there are some key legislative battles expected to ensue. Those mainly relate to the military draft bill, the Haredi draft bill as it is known, which is meant to bring the Haredi and the ultra-Orthodox into the military. The state budget, which legislators on the coalition are aiming to tackle by the end of the year, and of course the potential revival of the judicial reform.
Now let's take a look at the full report.
Inside the Knesset on Monday, lawmakers are slated to approve a controversial pair of bills that seek to limit UNRWA's operations in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, despite pushback from the United Nations, the European Union, and the Biden administration. One bill, sponsored by MKs Yulia Malinovsky and Danny Luz, would ban Israeli officials from having any contact with UNRWA, while another, led by MK Boaz Bismuth, would revoke the organization's 1967 authorization to operate in the country. The 68-strong coalition and members of the opposition are expected to support these bills. Israel alleges that around 10% of UNRWA staff in Gaza have ties to terror. Lawmakers will also debate a government bill extending mandatory IDF service for men to 3 years. And, perhaps most controversial, the ultra-Orthodox draft bill, which is entangled with budget negotiations. The Haredi community's long-standing exemptions have faced high court scrutiny, pressuring lawmakers to pass a draft law that mandates broader participation. The hope is that such a bill could help address the IDF's manpower shortage. United Toward Judaism, a coalition partner, has declared it will only back the budget if the draft bill passes, intensifying the standoff. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu aims to pass the budget by year-end, balancing war-related expenditures with a list of politically tough spending cuts and proposed tax hikes. Failure to finalize the budget by March 31 would trigger early elections, adding urgency as lawmakers strive to fund the ongoing war against Hamas and Hezbollah while maintaining political stability.
Anti-Semitism continues to rear its ugly head on campuses and across communities in the United States. On Saturday, a 39-year-old Jewish man in Chicago, in a predominantly Orthodox Jewish neighborhood, was shot several times in the shoulder while walking to synagogue. The assailant, who has not been identified by police, was filmed several minutes before the shooting, shouting Allahu Akbar. After shooting the victim, the attacker engaged in a 2-minute shootout with Chicago police and was shot several times. Both the victim and the attacker were hospitalized, with the perpetrator in critical condition and the victim in stable condition. The police are working closely with the Jewish community to ensure that no further attacks take place in the Chicago area. Now, as the U.S. election nears, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are sparring over foreign policy and critical swing state votes. Here's more on the story from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
With just over a week to go until the U.S. election, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are vying for votes, including from Arab American and Muslim communities in swing state Michigan, who are concerned about Israel's war in Gaza. Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have reportedly spoken multiple times recently as Israel wages a regional war and launched a retaliatory strike against Iran over the weekend. These conversations come amid what appear to be cooling relations between Washington and Jerusalem. However, when asked Sunday if she felt Trump and Netanyahu's talks could undermine the administration's Middle East efforts, Harris said no.
I do believe that it is critically important that we, as the United States of America, be an active participant in encouraging, one, that this war ends, that we get the hostages out, but also that there is a real commitment among nations to a two-state solution in the day after, and we have to fulfill that responsibility.
Polls show a tight race, with both candidates trading barbs. However, Harris faced backlash last week after labeling Trump a fascist. New York City Mayor Eric Adams, himself a Democrat, criticized the comment. "I don't think it's appropriate to compare a former president to Hitler," he said on Sunday. On Friday, a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor appeared in a Trump campaign video.
"I know more about Hitler than Kamala will ever know in 1,000 lifetimes. For her to accuse President Trump of being like Hitler is the worst thing I've ever heard in my 75 years living in the United States."
Yesterday marked 6 years since the Tree of Life synagogue attack in Pittsburgh. Harris issued a statement on behalf of herself and her Jewish husband, pledging to always prioritize the safety and security of Jewish communities in the United States.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies are expected alongside warm temperatures, reaching highs of about 26 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.